Well, hello, friends. Today I want to talk about Author Nation. So, Author Nation is an indie author conference, convention, event in Las Vegas. And Author Nation used to be something called 20 Books to 50K, which was the largest indie author conference in the world. And last year, the branding shifted and ownership changed, and 20 Books became Author Nation. And I just attended the first ever Author Nation event, and it was interesting. So I want to break down a little bit pros and cons, just give you a honest breakdown of my experience. Full disclaimer, I loved 20 Books. I genuinely thought 20 Books was a fantastic experience, even though it had some issues. And that probably has colored my experience a little bit, because I went into this whole thing with a bit of a bias. And I just want to acknowledge that, out of the gate. I am one of my principles in life is to be ruthlessly honest. And so part of being ruthlessly honest is just understanding where you might have oversight or where you might have bias because of prior experience. And in this case, I did go into this skeptical. I went in thinking to myself, to a certain degree, 20 Books was working really well. Why make changes? And there were certainly things about 20 Books that I would have changed if I had been in charge, but I wasn't in charge, have never been in charge. So I was sort of content to live with them. But going into Author Nation, there were quite a few differences from 20 Books, and so that's colored my experience a little bit. At the same time, I tried as much as possible while I was at Author Nation and since I've come back to talk to other people, to hear their experiences as well, to make sure that my bias wasn't out of control, right? That I wasn't just being grumpy about the whole thing and about the changes, to really try and give them a fair shake. And unfortunately, a lot of my experiences seem to be echoed in other people. You can probably already tell which way I lean on Author Nation, but I do also want to talk about what was positive about the experience, and so that's where I'm going to start. What did I really like about Author Nation? Well, first of all, I had a great time. Like, objectively, I had a good week. I was expecting to spend a bunch of time in my room and maybe get some work done, and I did none. I did zero work besides talking to other people. And one thing that Author Nation did really well is they provided spaces for people to congregate and talk that were not in the bars. So if you've ever been to Las Vegas, then you probably resonate with what I'm about to say. You are either, if you're in Las Vegas, you are either out on the Strip, or you are in a restaurant, or you are in a casino. And when 20 Books was a thing, the only places that were really good for congregating were in the bars at the casinos, which are filled with smoke, which are incredibly loud, and just not a great environment for having conversation. And I was really pleased to see that Author Nation provided spaces with couches and comfortable seating for authors to gather in the actual conference area, which means that it's not very loud and there's not a lot of smoke. And those two things were just absolutely fantastic. And so I really appreciated that chance, and I ended up spending just a tremendous amount of time not in my room, just hanging out, talking to different people. As people had things to do, they would come and go. Different people would rotate into the conversations. But the reason I go to conferences is to talk to other authors, to find out what they're doing, to learn from them. And so that was a really cool thing that Author Nation provided. The second thing I think that I really appreciated about Author Nation is that they shrank their programming. So one of the challenges of 20 books was that there was often so much going on that you didn't necessarily know what you should go see, and often you'd want to go and like see two different sessions that were happening at the same time. And I understand the desire as a conference to just have a lot of programming, but I think having less programming and having that programming be more targeted and applicable to the people who are attending is just better. And Author Nation did that. There were fewer speakers, but those speakers were sort of the cream of the crop instead of just sort of opening up the floor to everybody. So those are some of the things that I really appreciated about Author Nation. Author Nation this past year was a pretty good ranked, I would say like a 7 out of 10 when it comes to like seeing people there. And part of that is just because it's expensive. Part of that is because a lot of people just didn't come. But otherwise, like I said, there were good spaces to talk, and the programming, being shrunk and being focused, a lot of the panels were really good. Okay. Unfortunately, that's about the extent of the pros. And I'm not going to get into the entire list of cons because I don't think that's quite fair, because some of them are just personal preference on my part. But there were a few things that I found a bit troubling about Author Nation. First was the cost. It was expensive, and it's only getting more expensive. Vegas is already an expensive trip, and one of the things I appreciated about 20 Books was their desire to keep everything as cheap as humanly possible, which makes sense when your target market is new authors, people who don't necessarily have a lot of money to spend on this new, adventure, and people who are just getting started out. Or even people who have been publishing for a while but haven't necessarily had success and are still trying to figure out the publishing side of being an indie author. Well, with the costs just skyrocketing, going from a $400 ticket to an $800 ticket, just with the cost of rooms for a week and the cost of food going up, and with all of these things, I have a hard time justifying the conference at the price it is, or at the price it was this year, and with the prices going up, I just think it's not good. It's not good. The second real challenge for me with Author Nation was that while I appreciated the structuring of the programming, the programming was hit or miss. Some people said the sessions that they went to were really good, but the majority of the people I talked to who have been in the business of publishing for a while as an indie author said that most of the programming they went to was either partially or wholly incorrect. That is, information was being shared that isn't current and accurate. And that is a problem. So one of the advantages that 20 Books had was that all of the programming was done by people who were in the thick of it, right? Nobody was being paid to speak. And so the result was that you ended up with a lot of speakers who were just indie authors. They were people who had just published some books and figured out a strategy, and then they came to 20 books in order to share what they had just learned. And so all of their information was current to the market. In publishing, information doesn't stay current to the market year over year, right? Things change incredibly quickly, and strategies that worked a year ago probably don't work today. And so you have to constantly be shifting and evolving and adapting to new circumstances. Author Nation has taken a little bit of a different approach, and anybody who was speaking got some sort of benefit from the conference, whether it was a comped room or whether it was being paid outright. And that's a little bit problematic because it tends to attract people who are not authors, but people who are who make their living speaking, right? Who make their living doing the conference circuit, which means that a lot of the information they were talking about was just out of date, right? Because it's been so long since they were actually active in the publishing world as someone who is trying to make money publishing. And that's a shame, because it means that the people who are sitting and listening are getting information that's a couple years old, and they're going to go home and they're going to try it, and it's not going to work. Or if it does work, it'll work to a limited degree. That's a challenge, because it's really hard to pick through. If you're a new author, it's really hard to pick through what information is accurate and what information is not, what information is going to be helpful and what information is too old to be helpful. Like, if you don't have the experience, it's really hard to identify that. And if you do have the experience and you're sitting in a session and you're hearing someone say something and you're like, this isn't right. Like, this is, yeah, that may have worked 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, but that strategy doesn't work anymore. That's a tremendously frustrating position to be in, right? And so I didn't appreciate that. And then and there are probably a bunch of other things that I could say about Author Nation that I didn't really appreciate. But the last one I'll say is I didn't appreciate how the focus has switched from we are an indie author community and we are all pitching in because a rising tide lifts all boats, to here are a bunch of vendors who can make it easier for you to write through AI tools, who can make it easier for you to publish if you pay them money, who can give you deals on your books with poor royalties. And so as a new author, use these services and you'll be able to publish your book. And that's just a difference in mindset. The thing about being an indie author is that when you start, it is of utmost importance that you do things yourself, that you write your own book, that you figure out how to publish, right? How to upload to KDP and do all of that stuff, get your own cover. It's really important that you understand the process of how publishing works, because you cannot scale if you don't understand the systems. So when a new author steps into the publishing world and immediately starts using all of these different tools and all of these different services to essentially pay to have their book published, they don't learn what is necessary in order to scale, right? Because you can't scale using these services. It's just not, it's not possible. And so it's a bit of a shame that that's the focus of an indie conference, in a way, I think what I'm trying to say is that because of the shift into having vendors, I'm afraid that Author Nation is going to lose what makes an indie conference valuable, which is the opportunity for new authors to succeed on their own without having to shell out a bunch of money. I'm afraid that they're inadvertently, cutting off a path to success. To make sure that I'm counterbalancing here, and again, ruthless honesty, right? To make sure that I'm counterbalancing, I will say that this shift into a focus on vendors does benefit people who are already in the indie world, who already have an established brand and can leverage what they've already done and can leverage some of these tools to now accelerate. That is it's helpful for those people. The problem is that those people could succeed without the tools, right? And they already know most of these tools. Like people who have been in the indie space for any amount of time quickly learn about all of these different tools. The danger is in introducing them to new authors and convincing new authors that if they want to succeed, they need these things, right? Now, I generally don't like, overall negatively toned videos, and I'm kind of feeling like this one is a little bit negatively toned, maybe a lot of bit. So let me wrap up here by just saying that I really wish Author Nation all the success in the world. It would be awesome to see the people involved and the community succeed. I would really love that. Partly because 20 Books holds a special place in my heart, and I really would love to see its spirit carried on. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be going back to Author Nation. There are some mitigating circumstances around that. I'm generally trying to reduce the amount of times I travel in a year, and I don't like Las Vegas. It's just not my scene. I don't like shouting over slot machines. I don't like the constant smoke. I don't like how expensive everything is. I'd rather spend my time elsewhere. If I'm going to go to a convention or to a conference in order to be social, Dragon Con is probably the place. It has a tremendous author community. Dragon Con does not have the indie author focus, and the programming is for fans. It is not for authors, which is there's a very distinct difference there. But I hope to hear over the next few years that Author Nation is getting better and better and better, and I look forward to going back in the future if I feel like it, has improved to the point where it's worthwhile. But as it stands now, I'm not going back. So, yeah, that's it. That's a recap. I do want to, again, stress, I had a great time. I talked to a lot of people. I met a lot of new people. It was fantastic. I got to hang out with my friends, and that is invaluable. And so I'm just going to find other places to do that. Anyway, I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you later.